Welcome everyone to this episode of the Tiny Fit Diva podcast. I'm your host, Kylie Terhune, functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner. And I'm excited today to introduce you to my friend, Dr. Nathan Siebenthaller. So I'm going to give you a quick intro before we jump in. Dr. Siebenthaller graduated from Capital University magna cum laude with an exercise science degree in 2012. He was a 3-time letterman in football and student of the year for health and sports sciences in 2010. He then attended chiropractic school at Logan College of Chiropractic and graduated magna cum laude in 2015. He became interested in chiropractic after being helped by a chiropractor in high school. His chiropractor utilized a lot of nutrition, and this sparked Dr. Siebenthaller's interest in nutrition as well. Super cool. So I'm really excited to have you on today. We're going to talk a little bit about stress and the brain and how we can de-stress and hack our brain a little bit. So I'm excited to talk about that. So welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you. Happy to be here.
Yeah. So we actually go to the same church, and it's kind of funny because we didn't technically meet that way.
Right.
We kind of roundabout met, and then we realized we go to the same church, and then a lot of mutual friends said that we should get together and talk. So it was meant to be that we sat down, and a few weeks ago, and I'm sorry I didn't prepare you that I was going to ask this question. I forgot to tell you this, but a few weeks ago, I went to his office to kind of see what he does, and we went through this process. So I was going to put you on the spot real quick and have you share with everybody what it was that we did, because there were some very personal things that he was able to pull out about me. He said I was ADD, and what was the other one? I forget. Oh, I have trust issues.
I didn't know if you wanted me to say it. I was like,
No, it got real so fast. So no, share kind of what was that process that I sat down in the chair, and what were we going through?
Yeah. So with all of our patients that come in, the first thing we do is going to be a history, go over their case. And then the second thing we do is called a stress response evaluation. So we're looking at brain waves, heart rate variability, heart rate, breathing rate, muscle tone in the traps, skin conductance, and hand temperature.
So just to paint the picture for everybody, it's very much like you're getting hooked up to a lie detector test.
Yep.
You have things on your head, on your ears, on your back, on your hands. You're sitting in a chair, and there's a screen in front of you. So it's very similar to that.
Yeah. And so then we put people through a series. After a couple baselines, we go through a series of stressors and recoveries. And then based off all of that, we're able to tell kind of what's going on in people, because it's not just a snapshot picture.
Yeah.
It's actually, what do you do? How do you react? How do you recover? It's a dynamic look at what's going on with your nervous system.
Yeah, and it's looking at your heart rate and all of those things. And the first stressor that it puts you through is doing math backwards very quickly and under pressure. And I literally couldn't do that if I wasn't under pressure and had all the time in the world. Where what was it, counting backwards by 7 from 1,000? I was like skipping hundreds at a time.
And I don't know if it's any better, but we have an alternate one where it's called a Stroop Test. And so it'll say the words red, green, yellow, blue, but they'll all be different colors. And you have to say the color, not the word. And so I don't know which is better for adults, because they get frustrated by both of them. So.
Yeah, no kidding. So I will say definitely the stressors that the monitor puts you through are definitely stressful. So, but what was interesting is then you print out a report that gives you sort of your stress evaluation, and you're able to kind of evaluate different things. And for me, my stress levels went up when my eyes were closed.
Yep. Yeah, so your heart rate increased. I think your hands got sweatier, you're breathing harder, all that stuff. And so that's a big indicator that this person doesn't trust things.
This is so funny to me. I laugh so hard. We're sitting in this room. He's like, so this right here tells me you have trust issues. I'm like, how can you tell? So, that can be from so many different things. But his point was, most of the time when your eyes are closed, people relax more. But in my case, things are a little more stressful. And so are you worried that someone else is in the room with you? Does your mind just wander more? Like, what is that? But apparently my body does not necessarily shut down or calm down more when my eyes are closed, which is kind of funny.
Right.
So then we went and we did a little bit of muscle testing. which is pretty cool. And that's something that, and we'll get into this, that's something, all of these things that you're talking about are things that differentiate you from other chiropractors. Because one of the things I've noticed, I'm sure the listeners know as well, if they've ever been to a chiropractor, which by the way, let me pause really quickly and say, if you haven't been to a chiropractor, you need to go see a chiropractor. I have so many people that I work with that for whatever reason are nervous about it. And I'm like, it will literally change your life. Just get over it and try it. I think a lot of people are nervous about like neck adjustments or something.
Exactly.
Ask somebody not to do that the first time if that makes you nervous, but it helps so much. Like I even had this client at the gym, her knee was hurting for weeks, and I was like, go to the chiropractor, go to the chiropractor, go to the chiropractor. He can help you. With like two adjustments later, she's like, oh my gosh, it's so great. And now that I've been, I'm not as nervous. I'm totally going back and I'm not in pain anymore. It's so easy, you guys. Anyway, sorry, I digress. But so we went.
What I usually tell people is I don't care if you see me, just see somebody.
Yeah.
And there's lots of different techniques that you don't have to do that twisting and popping. So if they're nervous about it, just find someone who does some light force adjusting and they'll be great.
Yeah, see, like me and probably my dad too, he loves that like pop sound. Like he's always like crack my back, and he likes to hear and feel that adjustment. But you did something on my neck where there was no twisting of my neck or anything at all. So that's possible as well. So then we went into another room and we did some muscle testing, and every chiropractor has different, some are acupuncturists, some are, some do muscle testing, which is called kinesiology, right?
Yeah, applied kinesiology. Yeah.
Applied kinesiology. And then there's so many different fields depending on the individual's interests that they can do. So we did a little bit of that. And then what did we do next? I'm trying to remember.
Did we do any nutritional testing stuff?
Oh, that's right. We did. Oh, I think it was, combined. Yeah. So you had me hold some supplements, I think. And so that's where you can muscle test. You can hold individual supplements and see how your body responds to them. And then we did like a 10-minute brain entrainment session, which is like forced meditation almost. So we'll talk about all that. But it was really, really interesting to kind of experience different ways and different things that you did. So I really enjoyed that. So these are all very unique, I think, to you. So what got you interested in these different modalities?
So as far as applied kinesiology goes, the technique that I use, what got me into that was the chiropractor that I grew up going to. He started off there. He ended up hurting his back and wasn't able to do it so much because it's kind of a physical technique to be able to do. But I thought if it was good enough for him, that's where I'll start, and I can go wherever I end up. But that's what got me into it. And then just because of its ability, I feel like, to really get to the source of the issue and the way that it uses the body's neurology, that's what really kind of kept me in it instead of going off another way. So I would say that is really what separates me, is the focus on that brain-based wellness and that nervous system, because most chiropractors say they're focusing on the nervous system, but the way that we look at things with bones and joints typically aren't the issue because they can't move on their own. They need muscles to move them. Muscles can't contract on their own. They need the nerve to tell them to contract. So rather than just going in and purely focusing on the muscles and the joints, we're taking that really holistic viewpoint and trying to influence that brain in a way that's going to help you heal at the source of the issue and not just the symptoms.
So if someone isn't familiar with muscle testing, when you first get exposed to it, it sounds extremely woo-woo. And I think foundationally, one of the things that you have to just believe in order to get mentally there to accept this, that it's a thing, is that we are beings of energy, and that your body can communicate what it needs, sometimes more effectively than your brain can, or or how we consciously think, right?
So over 90% of the brain operates at a subconscious level. That's where that whole you only use 10% of your brain comes from. Because the rest of it, it's still working. You're always using all of your brain. It's just it's subconscious.
Yeah. So, it can be a really powerful tool for sure. I think I'm learning more and more about it and how you can use it in different settings. And there's some pretty cool stuff. So you work a lot with sort of the nervous system and the brain and things like that. So let's talk about stress, because I think that ends up being what affects all of these different areas.
Absolutely.
So can you talk about how stress affects the brain and the body, and why it's important to be aware of managing our stress?
Yeah. And when people hear the word stress, they think of, the mental, emotional stuff, like I got to run the kids from here to there, I got to go shopping, I got to make food, just all the day-to-day stuff. But that's just one form of stress. There's also physical stress, and there's chemical stress as well. So being aware that it doesn't matter what type of stress it is, our body always reacts the same. And what happens is there's a whole slew of physiological things that occur, including blood leaving your digestive and reproductive organs. So what are huge problems today? Digestive issues, whether it's constipation, diarrhea, leaky gut, Crohn's, celiacs, reflux, all of these different things are digestive related. And if you're not getting blood there because you're always stressed out, you're really not going to be able to heal that very well. So whether it was you drank a Coke or had too much sugar, you're exposed to harmful chemicals or radiation, those are all chemical stressors that are going to cause issues. Or let's say you sprain an ankle, that's a physical stressor. So there's all these different types of stress that mount on the body. And that's what, as chiropractors, we're ultimately fixing. When we're adjusting the spine, it's kind of a shortcut that the brain has tried to take to try to deal with the stress when it gets overwhelmed. And then you get this miscommunication because of this shortcut. And when we adjust you, it's essentially a neurologic reset button that gets things back on track.
So a couple of things I wanted to pull out there, because you threw out radiation as a stressor. So when I got my cancer diagnosis and I was looking into lymphoma, and Hodgkin's and stuff, it's very environmental toxicity, chemical toxicity related. And so my mom goes, well, you never know. You did grow up by the mound. And I was like, oh my gosh, yes, I did. And for people who don't know where I live, I grew up in Miamisburg, Ohio. They had a nuclear power plant called Mound Laboratories, and it got shut down. I mean, there was like a radiation leak, all this kind of stuff. They used to pump stuff out into the air. A lot of the people that worked there got cancer. People in the surrounding area got cancer. And when I'm talking about, like, I lived in that area, I drank the tap water for 18 years. It was literally like 2 blocks away from where that was. And so I was like, oh my gosh, like, you just like never know, how this stuff is affecting you. And then you get like mentally, emotionally stressed, your diet's not on point or whatever, and the stuff that builds up in your body, boom, you can get sick. And I'm not saying that's what caused it, but that was something that came up for me when I was kind of thinking through everything. And then when you were talking about muscle testing and you mentioned Coke, I was like, I've actually seen, people do muscle testing where, like, you take a bite of like a Snickers bar or something really sugary and not great for you, and they'll muscle test you in your arm, like by pushing down on your arm, it'll fall because your body's weak because of the energy or however you want to describe it of that food. And then you eat something healthy and you push down on the same muscle and it's strong. You're able to resist the push down. And it's so funny because you talk about that and it's like, there's no way you can resist it. You can hold that up. And then you see it happen and you're like, nah, they were in on it. So then you do it and you're like, what just happened?
And there's actually, that's one of the reasons I like to use the lingual taste test, because there's research showing how it works. Because when you taste it, your body knows what chemicals and stuff are in there, what are activating. It goes up to the hypothalamus, to the cortex, up to the muscles. And if it's an insult, it doesn't like it, it's a chemical stressor, you go weak. If it's fine, you stay strong.
Yeah. And the taste test is interesting too, because I had heard something about a different way. Cause I've run like blood tests for food sensitivities and things like that. And then of course you have the elimination process and reintroduction process that you can use to see how your body responds. But someone has told me once, just put like a banana as an example. Just take a piece of a banana and put it on your tongue. And if you hold it there, if your heart rate changes, your blood pressure or whatever, that's an indication that you're still sensitive to that food. And I thought,
Yep.
well, that's pretty simple, but that's just, I mean, you're not even digesting it. You're not even getting to that process. So if anything, you could save yourself a little hassle because you might have a bigger reaction if you ate the whole thing. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's fascinating if we're aware of what our body can tell us and the feedback that it gives us, or we're working with someone that is good at that, how much information it can truly give us. It's amazing.
And that's one thing with, you're talking about the taste. At Christmas time, I had a patient bring in they brought me some caramels. And I had another doc was like, hey, do you have anything that can like physically measure what's going on when you do a taste test? And I was like, I don't know, let me play around with my stuff. And so I hooked myself up to the heart rate variability, put in one of the caramels, and my heart rate variability started going off. And so I haven't done it with anything else to see.
And that was like without even eating. I was just placing it in your mouth.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Yeah. That's so interesting.
So I'm interested to see. I haven't played around with it anymore because I was just like, whoa, that's crazy.
It is crazy. My mom, she was proofreading some of the documents that she's really good at, like grammar and editing and things. And she was proofreading some of the documents that I did for my online course. And one of the PDFs that I was giving people as like a bonus in their welcome box was talking about the vibrational energy of food. Yep. And her feedback was, she's like, I don't know. She's like, that's a little weird. She's like, you might want to reword that. I'm like, okay, well, maybe I will. But I think I did end up rewording it a little bit. But it's true. There is like this vibration, this energy, and it affects your vibration and your energy, which sounds completely woo. But I mean, we used to think, that we're like these solid forms of flesh or whatever. And now we know, with quantum physics and stuff that no, we really are these little tiny balls of energy that have a lot of air in them, which is mind blowing, but it's crazy. So when you kind of think about it that way, it makes more sense. So let's talk about, so we know that stress is bad. We know that stress is usually part of almost any major disease, any sickness, any breakdown that we have in the body. And you did a nice job clarifying that can be mental, emotional, physical. There's so many different ways that stress can affect you. And then we want to be able to kind of hack our brains and hack our bodies to calm down. So one of the tools that you use is neurofeedback. So can you talk about what that means, what that is, how we can use it?
Yeah, so when we're using neurofeedback, the first thing we do is obviously we're doing that stress response evaluation. So we get kind of a global picture of what's going on with the brain. But then if we're deciding whether it's through the patient's symptoms or requests that they want to look more in the brain in the neurofeedback, or if it's us saying we need to look more at neurofeedback, it's called a clinical Q or brain mapping. And it's a QEEG, and we're looking at 5 sites of the brain. And it's similar to the stress response evaluation where we're kind of going through different things where we do a cognitive challenge, we play some binaural beats and see how their brain responds to them, open and close their eyes, and we just look at how their brain responds. And so we're looking at that at 5 different sites on the brain, and then we get a readout of what are their brainwaves doing versus what are they supposed to be doing. So are they in and out of range? And then if they're out of range, what does that typically come with symptom-wise? And so I can get probed for ADD or obsessive compulsive issues or,
why are you talking? Stop talking about me. Stop it. I was OCD like hardcore for like a long time. I've actually mellowed out quite a bit, but that's funny.
Yeah, not to throw anyone under the bus, but that's my wife too. So
I literally it's funny because now it's so normal and manageable that nobody would ever know that I had it. But actually when I was like 13 or so, it was so bad. I was like taking multiple showers. I was washing my hands until bled. I mean, it was like legit, like I probably needed help. But now as an adult, the worst thing that I do is I take like cleaning wipes on the airplane and I wipe down my seat because I'm I'm like, I don't know whose head was on this seat before mine. I don't know who was sick and hacking all over this seat.
I look at it, those germs are good and they're going to help my immune system.
I
So
know.
if I get sick, it's my fault.
I know. I just can't do it because I got to relax. I got to relax on the airplane.
That's true.
And I'm like, I can't.
Do you get scared of flying?
No, I don't actually. I didn't fly much as a child. I think one of the first big flights I took was when I was 12. And then I probably didn't fly much again until like my late teenage years. But since then, I've actually been flying a lot. I was dating someone that lived in Kansas. And so if I wanted to see him, he would fly to me and then I would fly to him. And so there was a lot of travel there. And then when I married Patrick, we try to travel as much as we can. And then I started traveling for business. And so now I'm traveling a lot more, but I like it. Actually, let me say this. I like getting to the destination. I don't like the process of like waiting in the airports and being small.
So it's not a fear of flying. It's just all the other stuff that goes.
Yeah, exactly. And as long as I wipe down my seat, I'm good. And usually I get other people in the plane like, oh, that's such a good idea. Why didn't I think of that? But I could probably be exposed to more germs. It's probably part of my problem. Anyway, so keep going. Okay, so you do this neurofeedback, and it gives you a lot of information on.
Yeah, and so with that clinical cue, that's one of the things I really like is in schools or at your medical doctor's office when they diagnose you with ADD or ADHD, it's just off of a survey of questions. But we're able to go and actually see what's going on with your brain, and then go after it from the source, and not just based off a random survey where maybe you do, maybe you don't actually have ADD, ADHD. So then one thing with ADD is it's an inverse between their beta and theta. So most people are supposed to have a higher beta when they're trying to focus, and kids or adults, when they have ADD, they kick off of beta and they go more into an increase in theta. So then we could try to work through that and increase their beta and suppress the theta so that they're able to focus better.
So can you explain those two brainwaves real quickly? Like what's the difference between those?
Yeah, so your brainwaves are just electromagnetic waves that are coming off your brain. They're coming off all the time. It's based off of different ionic reactions and stuff that are happening in your brain. And based on the frequency or the wavelength, they've got different names. So 1 to 3 hertz, so 1 to 3 brainwaves a second is called delta, and that is dominant during deep sleep. Theta is dominant during a lighter sleep. It's your ability to subconsciously relax. That's 3 to 8 hertz. 8 to 12 is alpha. That's a kind of ability to meditate or consciously relax yourself, focus on that relaxation. And then above that, kind of that 12 to 30 or so range is beta, and it's got a subdivision of SMR in there. And above that, kind of getting higher above 35 is gamma. So you're always making all of these brain waves, but which ones dominate during certain activities are what are able to help us diagnose and treat different things.
Okay, so that monitoring that while people are exposed to different things kind of helps you determine what's going on, like what their tendencies are. So are there different ways to do that? Are there different kinds of neurofeedback?
So there's different ways you can do it. I know some people that just do it with sound, where you'll put on essentially a headphone and the music will play when you're making the right brainwaves, and it'll stop when you're not. And the cool thing about neurofeedback compared to biofeedback is you can't force yourself to make more of certain brainwaves. You can't just like make more beta. When we're doing the training, we use it's both auditory and visual. And so you'll have this, you'll be hooked up, you'll have the leads on your head, and it'll be measuring them. And when you make the correct brainwaves, the picture will move. And then we'll also have it linked up with either different tones or play an MP3. You can even stream like a YouTube video while you're doing it, so you'll be able to watch. So I like things that allow us to get multiple senses at once. So that's why I liked having the auditory and the visual.
So my husband got me a meditation headband, which sounds very similar to that. It's called Muse. I think I told you this. I'll tell the
Yeah.
listeners. It's a pretty cool headband. So you put it on and it hooks up to a phone app. And when you are calm and your brain waves are starting to calm down, you hear birds, and the more hectic you are and the more distracted you are, the more it rains. Or if you're really distracted, it's like monsoon. And then it'll give you a little report afterwards that says, you heard this many birds. And the other day I heard 18 birds. And I was like, yay. And that's probably like not even close to being enough. There was definitely rain the whole time. But it's a fun little way to do it. And that's something that people can do at home. So that's another question is like, besides that specific example, are there ways that people can train this at home, that can do this at home? Is it, I know you have more technology involved where you get more information than just that basic immediate feedback, but.
Yeah, there's like you have that Muse. I've seen different ones as well. We have something that helps with changing the brainwaves, like you were talking about the forced meditation. And it's similar to neurofeedback, but it's different because it's forcing your brain to change. And over time of repeated use, it can help to rewire it, but it's more like a fishing for you versus teaching you to fish, which is what neurofeedback would be. But as far as at home stuff, other than some of those headset type things, I don't know of any. You might have seen the Halo advertised. Something came across my Facebook. Maybe they were just targeting me, but it was something they were promoting to athletes because it really increases SMR, which is kind of body and muscle, or brain and muscle communication. And it was talking about how you can learn new skills faster. Like you can learn to play the piano, or you can learn more agility type movements and different things faster because it's increasing that SMR brainwave while you're doing that. So you learn it faster. And that's, again, that's more of a brainwave entrainment type thing. But as far as just strict neurofeedback things at home, that Muse and there's a couple others out there, but I don't know of a ton of neurofeedback things for home.
So why would somebody come in for neurofeedback? What would they be looking to have it help them with?
So one of the most common things that we have is kids with ADD, ADHD, but really anything, any type of emotional issue, whether it's anxiety, depression, we talked about OCD, trouble sleeping is another big one. But those are probably the most common things that we get. PTSD is another good one. But anything like that.
So how long do you think it would take to somebody to practice that before they started seeing results? Because some of those things are pretty significant. You're talking about like ADD and things, and that's stuff that people have struggled with for a long time. And, you know, they've probably tried a lot of other things before coming to do something like that.
The general guideline or rule of thumb is at least 20 hours of neurofeedback. And when we do a session, it's 20 to 30 minutes. So I always tell people we're going to be looking at a minimum of 20 sessions. You'll probably start seeing some results, but to get really that permanent neurologic change, it's really cool that, you know, we used to think the brain was just what you got is what you got, but now we know neuroplasticity, that you can change that. So that's what we're taking advantage of through this kind of operant conditioning, is that ability for the brain to change. And so it takes time to rewire. It takes time to practice. Like anything, if you're going to try and learn a new skill, you don't just do it once or twice and you're an expert. To get that rewiring of the brain and make new synapses, it takes time. So you're looking generally at least 20 to 40 sessions.
Yeah, the whole concept of neuroplasticity is so cool, though, because they're finding more and more that you really can train your brain, and it can learn. Old dogs can learn new tricks. I mean, even the elderly can still,
That's right.
Yeah, it can still benefit from that kind of stuff, which is pretty awesome. There's so many different things like that. Like we didn't think once we lost brain cells, we were screwed over, but now we're like, no, you can create new ones. There's so many different cool things like that are coming out. So we mentioned the brainwave entrainment. So how is that different than neurofeedback, and in what situation would you use that?
So that brainwave entrainment, it uses something called the frequency following response of the brain, where for what we use, it's called the Brain Tap. It's a headset, and it's got lights underneath a visor, and then you'll hear guided imagery or music or different things in your ears, but underneath that are binaural beats and isochronic tones. And we have it, or we don't do it, but they program it so that the frequencies are matching those usually alpha and theta frequencies. And your brain hears that and sees that flashing light, and it wants to match that same frequency. So then it mirrors it. And what the Brain Tap does, it kind of takes you in and out of through all these different brain waves, because the brain likes change. And as it's going through that, you're forced into that alpha, that theta, and everything. So it's, like I said, kind of more like fishing for you by forcing you into it.
Mm-hmm.
We use that when people have difficulty doing well at neurofeedback. So sometimes it's like the brain just doesn't want to change. And so we'll kind of jumpstart that by putting them on the Brain Tap. So their brain gets used to going down into that alpha and theta and changing and getting more fluid, because that's one thing that when we're doing our SRE, we want to see engagement and disengagement, the ability for the brain to change. If people are just stuck, that's an issue. We've got to work on that fluidity of the brain. It should be able to switch from one task to another relatively easy. So if it can't, that's when we put people on Brain Tap. And we've started to do that even with a lot of our new patients at the very beginning, because when we adjust people, there's this 20-minute window where it's open basically, and you can help reset it to what you need it to be. So we've started to do more Brain Tap just after a typical adjustment to kind of help people relax afterwards and help their body heal.
It's pretty cool. That was one of the things that we did. And you're talking about, is it biurnal? Is that what they're called? Binaural? Binaural. Okay, I always mess that up. So binaural beats is when you have things in your ears and they're going between your left side and your right side for specific reasons, right? So is that sort of like the same concept as, I think it's called EMDR, where they're connecting both hemispheres of your brain? Or is it something different? Like, what's the purpose really of the binaural beats?
So I'm not overly familiar with EMDR, so okay. I'm not sure. But the binaural beats will, in one ear, you'll hear like 300 hertz. In the other one, you'll hear 310 hertz.
Okay.
Your brain cancels it out, so it hears 10, which is alpha. And then your brain wants to match it and get into that alpha state, that meditative relaxation state. So that's the purpose of it.
So basically what you're saying is our brains are just sheep that want to mimic and follow the leader. Sure. So you give them a good leader and they're good to go, right?
Yep.
Cool. So those are pretty cool. So how does nutrition play into all this? When we're talking about stress and hacking your brain and staying calm and things like that, what's your view on the importance of nutrition in all of these areas?
So nutrition is really important. I mean, one, if you're going to be mounting a constant stress response, you have to have the nutritional building blocks to make all the different hormones and things that you need. If you're in a stress response, you're just going to have a higher metabolic rate. So you have to be able to replace that stuff. You have to be able to detox the cellular waste that comes from running those different processes. So definitely, I mean, you need the right building blocks. And then also, you tend to be more in an inflamed state when you're stressed. So anti-inflammatory things, turmeric, boswellia, ginkgo, fish oil, those are all really important for the brain, but really in general. And then your adrenals, I mean, every organ tends to house certain nutrients, and the adrenals are a big house for vitamin C. So if you're always using your adrenals a bunch, then you're going to need more vitamin C.
Yeah. And we're as one of the only mammals, right, that we don't like produce our own vitamin C, or we produce a really small amount or something like that. Yeah. Right. It's like, so isn't it goats produce like a ton of vitamin C and we as humans don't? And it's like,
there's a lot of other mammals and stuff that, make their own, but we got to bring it in.
Yeah, that's crazy. So we get that through our food sources. So leafy greens and citrus fruits and things like that.
Right.
you don't have to be eating oranges every day, people, but it's in a lot of other foods too.
Broccoli has a ton of vitamin C. I think it's more than an orange.
I think strawberries too. I feel like strawberries have a lot, maybe even more than an orange. I don't know if that's true or not, but yeah, you can get a ton from those sources so that you can avoid scurvy and everything else. So no, but I mean, it does have a huge effect. I mean, we think of scurvy when we think, oh, that's not something anybody ever has anymore. But vitamin C does so many other things. And you're talking about how it affects or how it's connected to the adrenals. And so you're naturally depleted when you're stressed. And I think most people in America live in a
absolutely
low level chronic stress state all the time. So yeah, that's probably something to think about as well. It's just making sure you're getting your greens, making sure you're getting your fruits and vegetables, and you'll get enough vitamin C that way. But then also working on, getting out of that stress state. So do you have any tips besides like neurofeedback and things like that? Do you meditate or encourage your clients to meditate, or are there other stress relieving activities?
Yeah. So all of our patients, basically, I'd say at least 95% of our patients don't know how to breathe correctly. And that when you breathe.
Okay, wait, we have to stop because that was another one that you said. Guys, I just want to remind everyone on the podcast that I was a trained opera singer. And I went into his office and he's like, you need to breathe from your diaphragm. And I was like, I wasn't doing that.
Right. Well,
that's not good.
Go with that. I started learning about this stuff when I was in chiropractic school. And so I started practicing breathing then. And in high school, I was in band and choir. And so I was told at different seminars and stuff like, I have a good diaphragm. I'm able to control it well. But a couple of years ago, we took Lauren, my wife, and Andy, one of our team members, and we went down to get trained. I wanted them to go to the meetings to get trained on using the NeuroInfinity, our biofeedback and neurofeedback equipment. And they're talking about how you can raise your hand temperature just by thinking about it or practicing this deep diaphragmatic breathing. And I was like, okay, I'll show you. I can do it. I know how to do this. And I just closed my eyes and I sat back and I had it. And I hear them kind of start laughing. I'm like, what? I opened my eyes and my hand temperature just go, it was plummeting.
Down.
And then so I was like, what is going on? I know how to breathe with my diaphragm. So we come back, and one day, I think it was a Saturday, I was done, everyone was gone. I go in there and like sit down and put it on, and I'm practicing and my hand temperature was crashing. And then I realized I was breathing not with my chest, but still like in my rib cage. And I wasn't fully getting it down into the full stomach, into the diaphragm and everything. And so then I practiced it for a while. And then in about 5 minutes, I raised my hand temp about 5 degrees. Like, see, I can do it. And I like shut it all off, and then I left and went home. So it happens to the best of us.
Yeah, that's too funny. But you watch a baby breathe, and it's like we're born breathing correctly, and in that kind of deep diaphragmatic way. But then somehow when we get into adulthood, we tend to just be very shallow breathers.
Right.
And we have to kind of retrain ourselves to get that deep breathing down.
When you breathe up there, there's these sympathetic nerve ganglions, cell bodies of the sympathetic nerves. And when you breathe with your chest and your neck, you're activating those. And the traps are actually controlled by a nerve that comes from the brainstem, which is right next to those sympathetic centers, that fight or flight centers in the brain. And so breathing up there and utilizing those cause a fight or flight response. So breathing with the diaphragm helps control that. Also, inspiration is controlled by that sympathetic fight or flight response, and exhalation is controlled by the parasympathetic rest response. So I always have my patients practice breathing in for 4 seconds and out for 6, so that you're activating that parasympathetic response by having a longer exhale. I know there's other ways of doing it where you breathe in for 4, hold for 4, out for 4. There's all kinds of different ones. But you have to breathe out longer than you breathe in to really trigger that rest response.
Yeah, I've used that before, and it's surprising how quickly it can work, especially if you're really riled up about something and your heart is really racing and you're like, I really need to calm down because this is not good for me. And you can just, if you can force yourself to sit down and separate yourself from the situation and do that deep breathing, it can work within a couple minutes and really get your heart rate down. And you're like, wow, I feel way more in control and things like that. Yeah, for sure. That's definitely a good one.
Yeah, we also have a new patient book that we give out, and in it there's some autogenic relaxation or, autogenic muscle relaxation stuff where people can learn to control their bodies. Also, I think we talked about this, gargling and gagging are good ways to activate that parasympathetic mode to get out of that stress response.
Yeah, and gargling or humming or singing and things like that stimulates the vagus nerve, right?
Yep.
So not to get too off topic, but can you talk about like the importance of that? Like that's becoming more and more of an interesting subject of conversation. I'm hearing more about it. So I'm curious, like, why is that so important?
So the vagus nerve is cranial nerve 10. Again, it's coming out of the brainstem, but it controls a large part of your parasympathetic activity of your digestive organs. It's called the Great Wanderer because it starts up here, comes through the skull, goes down, and goes to virtually every organ in your chest and abdomen. It doesn't go to all of them, but the vast majority of them. So if you're wanting to secrete enough stomach acid to digest your food, or pancreatic enzymes, or your intestinal enzymes and different things, you have to be in a parasympathetic, relaxed state. And most people, like we talked about, are in an over-aroused sympathetic fight or flight response. So doing that gargling and different things can help strengthen the tone of that vagus nerve, and you're basically exercising it like you would lifting weights or something.
That's interesting. Yeah, it's a pretty neat thing how we like that's you think about it being in your neck, but in reality it affects so many different parts of your body. And I talk so much about gut health and how that's correlated to your hormones and your anxiety levels and all these different things. You're like, oh no, anxiety or mood stuff, that's in my brain. And it's like, well, no, there's a lot that has to do with your gut health and your neurotransmitters are regulated there. And it's so interesting how there's really no part of our body that's completely distinct and separate and alone and can function on its own. It really needs everything else.
Absolutely, yeah. It's more than the sum of its parts.
Yeah, exactly.
But that's how the probiotics affect you, is they have that communication. It's actually through the vagus nerve. So if you've heard of the gut-brain axis, that's pretty much regulated through the vagus nerve.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I'm going to have to learn more about that. That's a pretty fascinating thing. So what is something, like if you had to pick one thing to leave people with in terms of stress, brain health, finding a practitioner, taking charge of your own health, whatever it is, like what's your message to people?
So the main thing is realizing that you are more in control than you think you are. So most people are just on auto drive as they go through their lives. The story I always tell people when I talk about stress is, you wake up, you usually didn't get a good night's sleep. You get up, you eat something sugary, which is a chemical stressor. Then you're rushing off to work. You're on the road with all those idiots out there. And I always tell them, you're not the idiot, right? It's everyone else. You get to a job. Most people don't really like their jobs, or they're stressed out because of deadlines, or their boss, or their coworkers over there snapping their gum all the time. And so they're mentally, emotionally stressed. Then they go to work, or they go to lunch, and they get fast food, another chemical stress. They go back to their job, more stress. They get back on the road to go home, more stress. They get home. Generally, a lot of times people eat a better dinner, but still with the standard American diet, could be hit or miss. Then they sit down, they watch TV, and they don't realize that what's going on the TV is affecting you physiologically. So most people think they're relaxing, but in America, it's usually, sex, drugs, rock and roll and stuff on TV. You have a physiologic response, so that's stressing you out. Then you add in the blue light from our tablets and our screens and our phones, and then you don't get a good night's sleep, and so you don't recover, and you just start the cycle all over again.
Yeah.
So
I have caught myself physiologically reacting to stuff because I'll wear my blue light blockers. I'll do all of that. But if it's like a suspense or some, action thriller kind of thing, you'll feel your stomach tighten up. You're like, what the heck? Like, just relax. You're trying to relax, but your body responds for you. It's crazy.
Mm-hmm. So the thing that I try to get people to realize is that you can control these things. You can say yes, you can say no, you can decide what foods you eat. I really try to empower my patients to become active members in their health. And what's happening is not something that the body's doing to you, it's what it's doing for you. It's adapting, it's trying to keep you going. And so if you're getting sick or any type of symptom, it's just a warning sign from your body. And you can shut off that symptom, like taking the battery out of a smoke detector, or you can put the fire out. So I just really try to, lead people with that and let them make the decisions, because ultimately it's up to you if you want to get healthy or not. We're not going to do it for you.
Exactly. Oh my gosh, it's 100%. I have so many people ask me about, health or food or nutrition or whatever, and a lot of times gut health, if they're having digestive issues of some kind, because that's one of my favorite topics.
Yep.
And what I find a lot of times is, well, I'd rather take a supplement, or I would rather pay for an expensive test. I mean, they do get expensive very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
But, my foundation with people is nutrition. And if I vibe from you that you're not willing to start there, and you're not willing to give up something that is seemingly difficult, but in the grand scheme easy, like going gluten-free and dairy-free, or, giving up sugar for a while, or alcohol, or whatever it is,
Mm-hmm.
dropping something like gluten is too hard for you, I do not even want to go down the road of testing for you. Because ultimately I'm probably going to ask you to do that anyways, but you're going to be hundreds of dollars out of pocket at that point. So it's like we can tell you everything you need to know, but you have to be your own advocate. You have to be willing to do some hard things. And sometimes it gets easier. First of all, it gets easier. And what's hard in our head is not that hard in reality, I think.
There's a quote that my wife loves to use, and I've since picked it up too. It's actually from Pastor Dave. In one of his sermons, he was talking about, these things are hard, but you can do hard things.
You can do hard things. Yeah. Well, now that he's mentioned in this podcast, I'm going to have to send it to him or post it on our church page or something. Yep. Be like, you made it on air. So, okay. Thank you for being here. Where can people connect with you or find your website?
Yeah, our website is fullyalivechiropractic.com. You can email me at nathan@fullyalivechiropractic.com. And our phone number is 937-748-9708.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, Kylie.